Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to the Melissa M.A.D.E Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Melissa M.A.D.E Show. Now, I have a guest today that if you watched my stories a few weeks ago, you probably heard me call her a little firecracker. I love her spunk, and she has so much passion for helping people live a good quality of life. And she is creating massive waves, and at such a young age, too. She's going to inspire the poopy out of you. Her name is Toni Marinucci, and I told her, I checked to make sure I said that correctly. Toni Marinucci. She is a registered dietitian, and she just has a great, you guys are going to love following her because she has a great way about her. And you guys are going to see a pattern. When I have people on this show, I love to find people that can educate in very digestible bites. And I guess that's kind of a pun, but she does such a great job of when she teaches you that you're like, oh, I get that. That makes sense to me. I can apply that to my life. So let me give her a nice, fair introduction, and then we're just going to head into the questions because she's got some nuggets to share with you today. But she's a registered dietitian and business owner of Tips with Toni, who ironically teaches people how not to diet. I love that. Her team of registered dietitians provide online nutrition coaching to help women break free from the all or nothing mindset and encourage balance instead. Toni's mission is to end restrictive diet culture by providing simple tips to healthy living while incorporating foods you love. She recently gave a TEDx talk, very impressive, and wrote a book titled, which I love, Once Upon a Diet, where she discusses the parallels between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships and how we kind of treat them the same. So such a pleasure to have you on our podcast, Toni. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that amazing and beautiful introduction. You're very, very, very kind. And I love following you as well.
Oh, well, thank you. So before this, I always talk to my guests beforehand, and I was like, I'm just dying to know what got you into this whole realm of health and fitness and helping other people. And then I said, oh, well, wait. I said, I'm not going to be the only one that wants to hear this. So before we dive into your amazing content, what you share and your passion, can you share with everybody kind of what got you into this career path?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it started really, really young. Unfortunately, my story isn't unique in that I was overweight as a kid and teased about it and made to feel less than, and that I couldn't fit in until I lost the weight. Like some part of me just like didn't belong. And unfortunately, I carried that with me into my adulthood. Believe it or not, even after I lost the weight, I still had this piece of me that felt like I wasn't worthy or I wasn't enough. So long story short, I went about trying to lose weight because I wanted to be accepted by others. I realized like my crushes never liked me back. I really did tie my weight to my worth, and it led down very disordered eating patterns and behaviors. And it also, the reason why I wrote my book, Once Upon a Diet, is it also landed me in relationships that these men did not deserve my time or effort or energy, but I just didn't see that in myself. So I did all the things I think like most people do when they're trying to figure out how to lose weight, but they forget that they want to do it in a sustainable way. And I did it the extremes. I would, I would barely eat. I worked out a lot, and then I'd worked out some more, but then that led to binging, which then led to, undereating again. And I just stay stuck in this vicious cycle of undereating, overeating, very inconsistent, and really struggling with my relationship with food and my relationship with my body. And so fast forward, I decided to go to school to become a registered dietitian because, deep down, they actually wanted to help me. But then as I started to learn and apply that it actually wasn't about restriction. It wasn't about what you take out of your diets. It's actually what you add in. And when I switched the narrative from trying to change my body to change how it looked and instead started focusing on how food made me feel, that's when I found balance in my eating habits. So that's what I inspire and teach today is I really want women, people in general, but particularly women to understand that they don't have to be in a smaller body at a smaller size in order to be happy and healthy, that they can choose actually to be happy and healthy now and learn to care for their body in a very consistent, realistic, attainable way, where they can be both happy and healthy, regardless of the number on the scale, and also regardless of their relationship status. So we can talk about that a little bit later as well.
How many of you guys listening had kind of an aha moment? Because even to this day, Miss Toni, I have been with my husband we're almost at 32 years, married for 27 or 28. You kind of lose track. But still to this day, if I have body issues, like, I kind of fall off the bandwagon and I don't feel super good about myself, the relationship suffers a little bit, especially the physical side of it. But when I feel, when I've been eating well and I just feel really good about myself and I'm just on a really good schedule, the physical relationship is much better. So those things really tie into themselves quite strongly. So can you share with us how you equate dieting with how you date?
Yeah, absolutely. So very much what you just said is definitely one point, but the reason where I got inspired when I did my TEDx talk, it's because I had noticed this pattern that before women would enter our program and start working with us, they would jump from diet to diet, hoping each one was quote unquote the one. They basically went around like Cinderella's stepsisters, trying to jam their feet into something that clearly wasn't a good fit for them. And I would get so frustrated. I'm like, can't they see? Like, thank God they finally realized like, that's not the answer. There's no one size fits all approach. You have to figure out what works best for you. Like, I'm so grateful that they're finally here. But like, why did it take them so long to get here? Like, they would jump from diet to diet. It was basically the same diet, just in a different book, right? It's all based on like very extreme, rigid rules and restriction and very all or nothing. And I would get frustrated, right? But then at the same time, I had just got out of another serious, like 2 to 3 year relationship where, to be frank, it seemed like I wasted my time. Like, it was like another long-term relationship that I was like, how did I not see all the red flags? Like, how did I stay in this for so long? Like, why was I trying to make it work when clearly it wasn't working? And that's when I started to realize the parallels. And at first, I thought it was just ended there. Like, and that's where I gave my TED talk, but I actually only had 8 minutes to speak. And as I was preparing for the talk and I was trying to think about what was I going to say, I realized there was so many more parallels. And so then I had to write a book because I was like, there's just so much here. So everything from kind of like what we look for in a partner, I think a lot of people just don't define that or don't really get clear on what it is that they're looking for. And then they're kind of disappointed when it's not that, but it's because they were kind of just like throwing it out and seeing what sticks rather than being kind of a little bit more selective, right? Then also kind of like in a relationship, if you like the results it's giving you, whether it's in a diet or a relationship, you're going to have to keep putting in that same amount of effort to get that in return. But I think once we get past the honeymoon phase, a lot of people kind of they're like, oh, it's either not working or they don't stop trying. And then they're like frustrated with like how it's no longer kind of making them happy or serving them. Right. So there's like some parallels there. And then also too, like how to keep it if you want something long-term and sustainable. There's very similar things that you have to like really enjoy the process. So one question I have people ask themselves when they're doing something, when they're in it past that honeymoon phase is like, do I even like this? Like, is this something, do I like the food that I'm eating? Do I like the person I am when I'm with this partner? Do I even like my partner anymore? Like, what's going on? And that doesn't mean you have to stop it, but things probably do need to shift. Sometimes you have to end it and you have to stop it and you have to realize, you know what, this isn't for me. But there's also the last question I have people ask themselves, like after a diet or after they're in a relationship or they've tried something new, is what lessons did I learn from this? And that's the question that I missed a lot. I never really sat in between, even though I'd be in like a long-term relationship, then I wouldn't be in one for like a couple of years. Then I was a pattern. I repeated this pattern. And I realized that I was never learning my lesson. So I was basically dating the same version of the same guy, just with a different name and a different face. Right. So, and that's what women were doing with dieting, same diet, just a different book. Right. So the reason why I do what I do today and why I wrote the book was really more so to just help people to see the patterns and learn how to break them so that they can develop healthier habits and behaviors to be, just healthier and better and happier overall, and instead of staying stuck to these things that really aren't serving them.
Yeah, that's as I was listening to you talk, I'm telling myself there is such a crazy parallel, because I see friends, girlfriends that keep getting in these relationships that are it's a same relationship but a different face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same way, that we will do with dieting as well, as because in order to market something that's got quick results, it's got to have, these catchy phrases and stuff like that. And so you feel like it's something different or something that'll work. But when you break it down, it's really just that same, usually very restrictive, very calorie devoid diet that isn't sustainable, just like that relationship. So you talk about people getting in toxic patterns, and you mentioned some questions, and I don't know if these are if two of those questions were of the three, but you also mentioned how there's three questions that you have people ask themselves, to kind of see if they are in these toxic patterns. Can you share those?
Yeah, definitely. So I did kind of share the two of them, but the first one I think is the most important one, which is, will this last past the honeymoon phase? Because if you're really trying to find something sustainable, well, then you have to ask yourself, like, if I can't follow this in 6 months, then it's not going to last in 6 months. And that's also okay. I want people to know that, like, it's okay to date around. It's okay to try something. I'm pretty sure you've done like competitions, right? You've done.
No, I haven't.
No, you haven't? I don't know why I thought you did. But like, if you have done, like, if you were doing like a bodybuilding competition or a bikini competition, or even training for like a marathon or something, like there's things that actually you do have to kick it up a notch, and you are going to have to make some sacrifices and changes in order to get there, but it's temporary. And you have to also understand that it's going to fade. So that weight's going to come back, or that high that you had from crossing the finish line is not lasting forever. Like, but that's okay, as long as you go in with that understanding. Whereas, like, I'll just be fully transparent. There have been times where, like, at first, dating people, it was like super fun. And I was like, oh, it's just, it's just fun, like whatever, like there's no serious part about it. But then I had caught feelings, and then I'd be disappointed that it wasn't turning into something long-term. And I think that's where people kind of get themselves stuck. It's like, they convince themselves like, oh, I'll just do it for a week, or I'll just do it for a month, or I'll just do it for 6 months. But then they never learn how to make it work for them after that. And that's where it can be a waste of your time, as long as it taught you something. So the first question is, will this last past the honeymoon phase? The second question is, do I even like this? And then the third question is, what lessons did I learn from this? And if you can kind of go through those, basically before you start something, ask that first question. When you're in something, ask that second question. And then if you're at the end of it and it didn't work out, ask her that last question and figure out what the lessons are, so that you can take what worked well for you and bring it into your future. And the stuff that just like, no, thanks, I don't need it, we just leave it in the past.
Right. I think that is so important. It's almost like, for lack of a better wording, like diet journaling, that you are, it's just like, in relationships as well, when you're going through the relationship, or you come to the end of a relationship, that you journal the feelings that you have, and what you got out of it, and what you want to see differently next time. And if you do find yourself, gravitating toward a lifestyle, or a meal plan, or anything, whatever you want to call it, that you journal the whole process. How do you feel in the beginning? How are you feeling toward it? And if you decide it's not for you, why? Write down what it was, so that you don't find yourself, I want to say, being suckered into another diet. That's such bad wording, but there just being some sort of, it's like advertisement, that makes, oh, this one looks different. But then you're like, wait a minute, checking my journal, it really sounds a lot like the one that I did last time, that I realized wasn't sustainable for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I am dying to hear. I think this is so cute. Because you share the difference between what you call planters and bouncers, or bouncers and planters.
Yes.
In this whole realm, if you could, I think some people are gonna have some aha moments again, kind of share where you came up with these two names and how they apply to people.
Yeah, well, I mean, writing a book is not easy, I'll tell you that. So like you'll have a lot of moments where you just are trying to write, trying to explain and just like really feeling stuck and nothing comes out. And then there's the moments where finally after sitting there for like days and hours and on repeat, you're like, "Oh my God, it came to me." So I was trying to describe the difference of like kind of like if you think about you probably all have that friend that and no shade if I'm describing you if you're that friend, but like I'm the other one. So we'll go there first. But that friend who kind of like, this week they're doing keto, then this week they're doing intermittent fasting, then this week they're doing paleo, then this week they're trying this superfood, then this week they're trying this. They're kind of just they're bouncing. They're never really giving something a fair chance, right? Because they're like really hooked on that honeymoon phase. Like they just love that dopamine hit. So it's like anything in the beginning is easy, right? That's why people fall for these. It's normal. It's human nature, right? We fall for the fad diets and the quick fixes because in that moment, it really gets us clear on like, oh, this is what we're doing, right? But then things just like, aren't as fun and new and exciting and the novelty fades. And so then we bounce to something else, right? So that's what a bouncer is, right? And they can do it with dating as well. It's like you just love like the nuance of a relationship, but you never really like get to the meat of what's it going to take, right? Then with the planter, I'm a planter, like hands down forever. I wish I could break this, but I'm learning. And also too, just to backtrack a bit, I'm very honest and transparent about the fact that I am a nutrition expert. I've been a registered dietitian for going on 9 years now. But as a I am in a happy relationship, but that doesn't make me a relationship expert by any means. Right. So I'm not really giving, even though I wrote a book about it, I'm not really giving relationship advice. I'm just using it as a way so that you can understand and relate to me. But as a planter, I am that person of who's a planter is like, they're basically trying to beat a dead horse to life. Like it's clearly dead. It's not working, but they'll just stick there and they'll stay there. And even though it really is like not going to work, they just so desperately hold on to hope. They almost like keep envisioning or reliving or trying to experience that honeymoon phase, right? So it's like, because the honeymoon phase happened, I know I can get there again. I know it can happen again. But sometimes like with the diet they're following, it really is just not sustainable. And it really is something that's just like, is not going to happen again because, weight loss, especially like it happens really quickly in the beginning, but then it is very normal to kind of have that slower period, plateaus, like, and that's where you have to kind of decide is like the work that I'm putting in worth it to kind of keep pushing, or am I going to be miserable? And so those are the sorts of questions that you have to be asking yourself too. But the planter is really someone who they ignore all the red flags and they just like want it so badly to work. So what I talk about in the book actually is neither good or bad. They're just who we are and we're kind of how we're wired. And it's important for us to actually, like I talk about balance a lot, take a little bit from the bouncers and a little bit from the planters, right? So with a planter, they almost need to realize that, when something's not working, it's okay to shift. It's okay to change. It's okay to stop something. It's okay to almost like if people feel like it's a giving up on a relationship. I know a lot of people, I just had someone on my podcast recently talk about like kind of life after divorce. There's so many people that hold on because they're just afraid that like divorce means failure, but divorce can be the beginning for so many, right? So the planter almost really needs to learn from the bouncers a little bit in that like, if it's not working, like don't waste your time. It's okay to give up, quote unquote, and, or make shifts or try something new. Whereas the bouncer really needs to maybe try a little harder or a little longer. I don't want to say harder, but like, a harder and a little longer, like, and kind of learn from that. So the answer is always in the middle. It's like, how can we learn from the bouncers? How can we learn from the planters? And how can we create something that works for us in the long run?
I love that. And number one, anybody watching the YouTube of this, you do not look like, because you do not look like you've been a registered dietitian for 9 years.
I have a very young appearance. Yeah.
You're gorgeous and I'm jealous. So when I was listening to this, and please, because this is your phrasing, I could be totally off base, but when I hear bouncers and planters, I was thinking that a bouncer is kind of the person that blames everything but themselves, where a planter is they keep blaming themselves. And so they stick with that one thing because they keep saying, it's me, I keep messing up. I don't have the willpower. I don't have the strength. So they keep sticking with that one diet plan that obviously isn't working for them because they feel it's their fault and not maybe something that's not sustainable for them.
When I was writing it, that's not what was in my head, but that does definitely make sense. One thing that it's like, I'm saying this in a really nice way. It's never anybody's fault, really. But at the end of the day, we both, whether you're a bouncer or a planter, you have to take radical responsibility for yourself. And once you notice the patterns, it is your responsibility to break them. In the middle, in it, it's hard to see. But once you're out of it, once you kind of start to notice it, that's when it's nobody's fault per se, but it is your decision. Now you have to make that choice to change it, whether you fall into one camp or the other.
Absolutely. And that kind of segues perfectly into you talking about to measure what matters. And so, as a registered diet, and I believe I did read that you have your master's, right?
Yes, my master's in nutrition.
Way to go, girl.
Thanks.
Love that. To share with people, to you, what is the most important thing that you are measuring on your journey of becoming or staying, a healthy individual?
Yeah. So I think most people go directly to the scale. And as we know, the scale can change, especially for women, and just there's so many fluctuations. And, we also know that weight looks different on everyone based off of their muscle mass, their height. There's just so many factors. So I really try to get people, it's okay to have a weight loss goal, if that's important to you, but it's not the big thing. It's not the main thing. We really want to measure how you feel, your confidence, your relationship with food, PRs in the gym, your energy levels, how you part of like your relationship with food is like how you're navigating social situations and just life in general. Like, are you enjoying your life? Because food can be a beautiful part of your life. There's so many people who fear food and fear being able to know how to incorporate it, or they're obsessing about it of when do I eat? How much do I eat? How do I eat? And I just really hope that people can come make peace with food and make peace with their bodies and start to measure what truly matters, which is how you feel, and just overall, like your progress, not so much like that there's like an end to it. If that makes sense? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So when you work with clients, and you have them come to you and say that they've been eating the standard American diet for quite a while, and they've been sedentary, a lot of maybe fast food, and they've got, the word, I have to be careful because I know it's trademarked, or it's not trademarked, but there is a protocol for intuitive eating. So I'm not using intuitive eating for the protocol, but for people, how, we all hope that there's a point in time when people can get to where they can really listen to their own, hunger and satiety cues, and to actually want to go for the healthier food versus, the foods that call their name because they have those addictive properties. In the beginning stages of that, how do you help people through that so that they can do what you're saying with, measuring what really matters and being sustainable and being a bouncer and a planter?
I love that question. It's such a great question. Obviously, everyone is unique, but there are some very foundational things that we do with clients. So first things first, we will meet you where you're at. So even though I'm sharing this, if this sounds like this isn't, anything close to where you're at, we would make modifications to it. But a pretty standard thing that we have our clients do in the beginning is just to take photos of their food. It provides a little bit of awareness and accountability without having to track, measure, or weigh anything at first, right? We want to start really simple and see how far can somebody get in their habits without having to overcomplicate things. So just by them taking a picture of their food, we can start to see what they're eating on an ongoing, like consistent, regular basis, rather than like cherry picking, like what they would probably consider as quote unquote bad. And we can really see the bigger picture. So we'll start with that. And then from there, I'll basically usually encourage them to at least start with eating 3 balanced, nutrient dense meals a day. I think a lot of people are either skipping breakfast, or not, whether they're eating it or not, or they're skipping lunch, or, then they're ravenous at dinner, then they're overeating. So we'll often just like kind of start with that, because a lot of people struggle with this is one thing I teach a lot. A lot of people are they're actually under eating during the day, or under eating during the week. And then that they're overeating at night or on the weekends. And that's where a lot of people struggle.
Mm-hmm.
They're also emotionally and psychologically drained. So I like to say they're physically hungry and psychologically hungry. They're not really catering to their needs. They're outpouring to others. They're forgetting to take, fill their cup first. And if you can picture a Venn diagram, so like one side of the Venn diagram is physical hunger, the other side is psychological hunger. When they're under fueling and not, getting enough sleep per se, or not caring for themselves in the way that they can, and that overlaps, that's what I call the danger zone. So that danger zone is where people really struggle. It's really hard to like you're going to have more cravings when you're not eating nutrient dense balanced meals. You're also going to have more cravings when you're stressed to the max, right? So it's learning how to, at least what we can do in the beginning is really just start to focus on the physical. And then often as a result, the psychological stuff will start to change. So we often will encourage like 3 balanced meals a day, basic principles like hydrating with water. So slowly incorporating more water if they're not doing that, focusing on their sleep so they're not so tired and like not kind of grabbing for things, and just like encouraging movement in a way that they enjoy. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Especially in the beginning, like just move. And everyone, I think, they underestimate the little changes and they forget that the little changes actually make you believe that this is possible. Right? Because we already think, how am I going to fit an hour of exercise in today? How am I going to work out this many days a week? How am I going to eat this many vegetables? How am I going to drink more fruit, eat more fruit and drink more water, whatever. And it's important for them to realize that actually it just starts with one small change. That one small change will ignite another small change, which will ignite another small change. And that's actually how you build momentum. Everyone's like has those moments of motivation, right? But motivation comes and goes. We need to really build on those habits and keep the momentum going. And I feel like the best way to do that, and what we've seen success in our clients, is by just celebrating those small wins and then building on it. And so when we work with a client, it's usually a minimum of 6 months because it takes so long to kind of unbreak their, get rid of those old habits, create new ones, make sure they're there to stay. And in the beginning, they're kind of like, okay, I got this. I can do this. Then they start to like pick up steam. And then they're like, the 6 months goes by like super quick. And they look back and they're like, wow, I have accomplished so much, but I actually didn't ever feel like I was working so hard. Like, yes, it took work. I had to make effort. It was difficult at times, but it wasn't like this maximum amount of effort that I think everyone usually starts with and then they burn out.
Right. Right. And I, listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, it's so important for people to really just embrace the fact that we are so much more successful when we do make those small changes. I even try often to tell people just to spend 72 hours with something new, whether it's just to drink a little more water for 72 hours. And hopefully within those 3 days, it just becomes a little easier for you. Mm-hmm. And then, you can, work on maybe getting rid of that nighttime snack and not eating right before you go to bed, and do that for 3 days. So there's just that. So you're not like, because hello, my name is Melissa, and I am very bad at just making a million huge changes at once and hoping that they all stick. Mm-hmm. And I know better. Mm-hmm. Those smaller changes do, and when we say small, they're huge. Adding so much more water to your diet, sleeping a little bit longer in the day, getting rid of some of the stress that's in your life we say it's small, but that can be 10 times what you're eating, to those things.
Yeah. And they're the things that really move the needle. And I like to say, let's work smarter, not harder. So if we could honestly, people underestimate 15 more minutes of sleep is really going to make a significant difference. Studies show it. 15 minutes of more sleep. So that way, even maybe you're only getting 5 to 6 hours a night. And ultimately, obviously, we want you to get more of that, but don't jump from trying to find, how am I going to fall asleep? I have so much to do. I can't get to fall asleep. I have anxiety, whatever it is. It's hard to fall asleep. So just practice, maybe taking a notepad next to your bed, journaling out all your thoughts, get it out of your head, and focus on 15 minutes earlier. That's it. Right. And you'll start to see that you feel really great the next day. And because you feel good, you want to do more. You want to try harder because you feel awesome and you're seeing and feeling the results and the progress. And it makes you want to keep doing it.
Okay. So I want to pick your brain a little bit. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
So a lot of the guests that I've had, and I guess it could be biased. I'm going to just say that right now. The guests that I've had have a lot of the same beliefs that I do. So I just want to preface this by saying that if you don't have the same beliefs as me and you're on my podcast, that's okay. I 100% want to hear your opinion of what you think of things. So
Sure.
I'm curious as to how and I know everybody is, I always say this in my podcast, you are an individual. And so, whatever Toni is recommending or whatever I do, or Dr. Will Cole or Cynthia Thurman, which we just talked about, it matters what is best for you, not what they do for themselves or what they recommend for some people. But you follow me. I am an intermittent faster, and I've been that way for 25 years, and I really believe in it. And it coincidentally, a lot of the people that I've had on my podcast are as well. And I didn't know that they all were, but when I bring it up, they were. So I just think there's that. As I said, it's that it's unintentional bias, I think. But I would love to know your thoughts on intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I'm excited to actually share about this. This is a very popular topic, and I think it's important to note that everyone is different, and what works for you might not work for somebody else, and all that. So, a couple things. First of all, just so you know, where my main clientele, who I work with and who I serve, really struggle with their relationship with food. So they might not have a full-blown eating disorder, but they might have in their history, or they're almost like borderline. So what we just classified it. It's not considered a diagnosis, but it's considered disordered eating. So they'll, intentionally skip meals. They'll spend massive amounts of time, effort, energy worrying about what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. It takes up a lot of their brain space. Getting dressed in the morning is really difficult. They've done all of the diets. They've really tried it all. And so what I really, they're already used to so many rules and a lot of rigidity. So from my personal experience of just working with so many clients over the years, is that first of all, intermittent fasting is an eating strategy. It's not so much a diet. So I want to just also say that. Depending on how many hours they're going, it's not as extreme, right, as some others, right? Some other methods. But what I'll say is that with my general population, it's not typically recommended, especially in the beginning. It might be something that as they start to build a healthier relationship with food, eat more like balanced meals, learn how to honor their hunger and their fullness cues, then that is something that if they have a specific goal and they've been having a hard time getting there, and it's something that they want to explore, then I will support that. However, unfortunately, a lot of the people that I work with, kind of like we were just kind of talking about before, is they already are what you would perceive as intermittent fasting. They're not eating breakfast, right? So they're not eating until then they're starving for lunch, then they're binging at night, and then they're starting over tomorrow when they have a lot of the guilt and shame around it. So in their mind, they think what they're doing is good, but their relationship with food is not, and the food quality is not. So from in that perspective, I don't really find it effective because unfortunately what's been happening, you said you've been doing this for like 25 years. It's more recently gotten very trendy. And it almost has become like another diet. And it's also often partnered with like other very restrictive eating regimens as well. So that's where it always comes down to, why are you doing it? Like, do you truly believe that this is a lifestyle or a way of eating that's going to make you feel better? It's going to make you sleep better. It's going to give you more energy. And if it does that, great. Or are you doing it because you just think it's another way for you to lose weight, regardless of how you feel, regardless of your energy levels, regardless of kind of anything, right? So that's always like, there's, and also too, my friend, if you ever really want a good guest for the podcast, Andre Ayesta, registered dietitian, he did his graduate degree in intermittent fasting. So he is very up to date with all of the knowledge and the research. And I actually just had a really great lengthy conversation with him on Instagram the other day. We did a live, and he was actually teaching like a lot of the science and the research out there, talking about like the health claims to it are still a little bit inconclusive. However, the method and using it for fat loss, it might be a strategy that if that's a goal for you, then it does help you to stay in that calorie deficit, because it's almost like a strict, almost like a time cutoff with meals. And then it's a lot harder to consume that amount of those meals in that time window, in that time frame. So that was kind of like a long answer, so I apologize.
I love it.
But that is what, because of, you always have to like, it depends who your audience is, right? So for particularly my audience, my clientele, it's not something that I'm like really gung ho about, especially in the beginning stages of their healing their relationship with food and their health journey.
Okay, so let me be devil's advocate here a little bit, only in the fact that I would assume, and I know I love how the whole 6 months working with people long-term and easing them into small steps of having a sustainable lifestyle. Love that. And so I think you would agree with, in the long term, it's better for people not to eat right before they go to bed because it just disrupts, quality of sleep. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like somebody who eats within a 12-hour window, say they get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and have breakfast, and then their dinner's at 7, that's 12 hours. Some schools of thought say that is intermittent fasting. And I guess maybe some wouldn't, because I would assume that maybe you would be okay with somebody eating within that 12-hour time frame, which is still kind of considered intermittent fasting. What do you thought?
Yeah. So technically that is fasting. Actually, even if you went to bed at midnight and woke up at 8 and had breakfast, technically that is fasting. Eating before bed, right before bed, particularly, especially the types of foods that you eat, might keep you up later, might disrupt your quality of sleep. And also might be those extra calories that maybe you're just tired and you think that you're hungry, but really if you just went to bed, you'd be fine. So that's where also too, I'm not an intuitive eating counselor. I use intuitive eating principles, but more so I would classify our style of coaching as habit-based and mindful eating approaches. So we don't want to create rules so much, because for our general clientele, it becomes like, oh, how can I break the rule? Like it almost becomes like a challenge. It's like telling them not to do something. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it harder and faster. Like, so in when I work with clients, it's like, okay, how did it affect your sleep? How did you feel when you woke up the next day? And really almost helping them come to that conclusion on their own. And knowing that it's also okay though, if they do eat close to bedtime, knowing that they're making that choice, that as a result, their sleep quality might be a little bit off, and that's totally fine. Where that kind of going back to, I think the way it's usually practiced is what I've heard a lot of people is intermittent fasting. I don't ever really heard of anyone just doing a 12-hour window from when they're practicing it. I've heard them doing more of like a 16 to 18-hour window. And that's where you really just have to know yourself. I think it's the type of the person that you are. And there's nothing wrong with like pushing. There's other thing too, I'll say, there's nothing wrong with like pushing back your breakfast. Technically breakfast is breaking the fast, whether that's within 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, that's your breakfast. Depending on your goals, sometimes I find that even people are doing that, they're still only having like maybe 1 or 2 meals a day. And I just find it really hard to get all of your body's needs within just 2 meals. You know what I mean? Like we need, adequate amount of protein, adequate amount of fiber, adequate amount of complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, nutrient dense foods. And I just find it harder to get that. So yeah, they might achieve like their fat loss goals per se, but from a health standard, it might be hard, depending on how long their windows are. So that's just something that I think if you're going to try it, do it under the care of a professional, so they can really make sure that you're not thinking now this is a reason that I can just eat whatever I want, whenever I want, with no effect on my health.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And you're so easy to talk to, because you always, in my mind, I've got the next question, and then you just say something. I'm like, gosh, what a good segue. So my last question I want to ask you is, again, it's just because you being the expert, I just want to pick your brain. Again, people, you are an individual, but generally speaking, do you and your other registered dietitians, do you have guidelines for macronutrients that you kind of shoot towards for people to eat to help them be healthy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to start, no. Then as they progress, when they feel comfortable, it's very individualized. So for some, we might calculate it, and without calculators in our heads and what we know. And then we might give more recommendations like, okay, now let's aim for standard. I would say regardless, we do encourage like 20 to 30 grams at each meal of protein, 20 to 30 grams of protein at each meal. It's just like a standard because it's going to help with their cravings. It's going to help them to feel full for their next meal. So we're generally always starting with, when we say 3 balanced meals, we're incorporating a protein, a complex carbohydrate, a healthy fat, and then some color like a fruit or a vegetable. That's a pretty standard way. And then once they have that, then we might, if we see that maybe their progress is stalling or they want to learn more, then we'll give them very specific targets for maybe their protein goals, or also depending on their medical conditions. Certain medical conditions might require a more consistent carbohydrate approach. So then we might give them specific carbohydrates to aim for. But once again, it's usually a range. And it's not like they have to do that. If they do that, they failed, it's just something to kind of give them guidance on. So we'll do that. And then for some clients, we'll actually have them track their calories and their macronutrients, and then we'll provide feedback. But it's usually towards like the later half of the program. Ultimately, the goal is to have somebody track if they want to, not because they feel like they have to. Right. And so that we use it as a tool so that they can just have a moment to check in, and it's like they're reaching for more food, but maybe they're out of their calories for that day. It's just to take in and check that moment. So maybe we need to increase their calories, or maybe it's like, I really I'm going over, but I'm just so tired right now. Like I actually know that I don't need this or want this. My body is just telling me I need calories because I need energy, but really I need a nap. So we'll definitely do that, but it's more of like an education purposes. At the end of the day, we want people to feel 100% in charge of their bodies and what they choose to do with them. And I think that with some education behind that, it makes it a little bit easier for them to come to those conclusions on what that looks like.
I mean, that's kind of a full circle moment, because you started off by saying how you have your clients take pictures of their food. And I think that's so valuable because that teaches them to see the
color, the components,
the proteins and the healthy fats and the complex carbohydrates. I love that. And it teaches them, because I was just talking to somebody, I think it was this morning, one of my girlfriends, about how hard it is when people get very, when it is so rigid that if they were to go to a restaurant, they would panic because they don't have, these tools that they have at home to have such, the
measuring cups. Yeah.
Yes.
Scales. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I would never want someone to walk into a restaurant and just get hives because they're like, I don't know how to perfect a plate. I don't want to ruin all the good that I've done. And I don't want to, get the wrong things and to have such anxiety over just sitting down and having a good meal out. And by even just starting off with look at your plate, let's just have you, eyeball your plate and see that you've got the nutrition on there and you've got about the right portion for yourself. And, I agree with those 3 meals a day. That's probably the strongest foundation.
Yeah. It's a good start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can use we have people use what's called the hunger scale. So they could start to, because also too, people are very disconnected from their hunger because of the fact that they're either super busy or they've dieted most of their life, or they were part of like the Clean Your Plate Club, or, they're just like want to lose weight. So they're just like under eating, regardless if they're hungry, their brain's telling them, nope, you're not hungry. You're not hungry. You're not hungry. So that's why, I start with the 3 balanced meals, use the hunger scale. There's not that they can't eat in between that. And definitely there's ability for snacks and all that, but it's just like, let's start with that and then go from there.
I love that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I would love for you, because you're very accomplished.
Thank you so much.
I'm very proud of you. You're sorry, mom and me. But you are, and there's so many different places to find you. And I would love for my audience to know, all of the different areas that you are. It's pretty fantastic. And so that might take 20 minutes for you to share all of your.
No, I'll go quick. It's Tips with Toni, and Toni with an I, and that you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. I don't really control my YouTube too much. My podcast is basically, my YouTube is just like all the podcast recordings, just the audio that just like automatically upload. But yeah, Tips with Toni on all social media platforms. And my website, tipswithtoni.com/coaching, if you want to apply to work with a dietitian on my team. And then my book, Once Upon a Diet, which I'm super proud of and excited for, you can get that on Amazon. There's a paperback copy, an Audible version, and the ebook as well. So go to Once Upon a Diet on Amazon to get your copy.
That is a great name. Is there a story behind how you got that name?
Well, because I kept noticing so by the end of the TED Talk, it actually came after I did the TED Talk, like I had the script idea in my head, and then we threw in the like Disney parallels after, because I was realizing that a lot of people go around like Cinderella's stepsisters, but really they need to be more like Goldilocks. So that's where it came from. And then as I started to realize like all the other parallels, I'm like, this is the name of the book too. This is it.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you spending I don't know what it was, not long enough time. And maybe we could have you on again in the future. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I enjoy following you as well. I love, like I said in the beginning, I love the way that you put your information out there and how you teach with that beautiful smile of yours. So you guys have to follow her, get that book, and let me know that you got it. Tag me, and of course tag Toni when you get it so that we can see it. And I appreciate you, and I hope that you continue to change people's lives as you already are in quite the abundance.
Thank you so much. You're amazing to chat with, and I really appreciated being here.
Yay. Okay, you guys. So another episode of the Melissa M.A.D.E Show. We will see you next week. Take care of yourself and look at your plates. Right, Toni?
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister. And until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.